The Germans had managed to keep their momentum up at the cost of some of their armor. Several ambushes by the Red Army had slowed the German advance somewhat, but they hadn't stopped it. But as the smoking wrecks of both German and Soviet tanks receded in the distance, another problem presented itself. The Soviets had destroyed the bridge, making it impossible for the vanguard to advance further. With engineers far behind, the commander in charge of the vanguard decided to go off-road and swing around, looking for another place to cross. In so doing, he played right into the hands of the Red Army. The chosen path took the Germans across open farmland, where the Soviets had constructed a strong defensive position, ready to repel the attackers. The Germans halted long enough to radio for artillery support, and then attacked. In this game, we played the scenario defense line. The Red Army held the center of the table, where they had a line of trenches for their infantry, and an anti-tank gun in a bunker. A T-26 tank also lay in ambush ready to shoot down any panzer that approached. There were 3 objectives on the table, the 2 fields and one by the bunker. German preparatory bombardment caused the T-26 and the forward aid station to become pinned before we started, but the AT gun was ready and started in ambush. The Germans started with a small probing force, decided to start with all their armor on the tables to soften up the defense before sending in their more vulnerable transports. The reserves would begin to show up in turn 3, and the Soviet reserves would have to wait until turn 5 to arrive. The Soviets started holding 2 objectives at the start of the game, but they were outscouted. So the Germans had to start by pulling 2 battle counters, and the Soviets had to pull 1. The attackers took the first turn and could try softening up the defense. A Tu-31 pushed forward to get the attention of the AT gun, and it worked. The gun crew spotted it and fired. It hit. The shot glanced off the armor, but stunned the crew. Their nerve held though, and they didn't flee. The other Tu-31 moved up and scanned for threats on the other flank, but found none. Next, the panzers pushed forward. The first spotted the T-26 and fired. It hit, but the shot glanced off. The crew passed their morale check. The next panzer drove up behind the stunned Tu-31 and aimed at the bunker. It spotted its target and hit. A high explosive shell slammed into the bunker, but had no effect. The last panzer moved up and looked for any targets by the trenches, but found nothing to shoot at. The Soviet defenders were ready to return fire, but received only 2 orders. The AT gun opened fire against the closest panzer, and the unpinned Tu-31. It hit the front of the panzer, and the shell went straight through, killing everyone inside as it went. It had a clear shot at the Tu-31 as well, but couldn't land the hit. All infantry remained unpinned, so the Soviets just put one of them in an ambush and ended their turn. The Germans got more than enough orders. The Tu-31 moved up and kept scanning for threats. It spotted the T-26 and fired. but missed completely. One panzer sped up along the side, trying to get behind the defensive line, while the other drove a bit slower, firing at the enemy infantry as it went. It fired air firing as the closest unit in the trench, but it had no effect. The Soviets also got more orders than they could use. The AT gun took aim at the 231 and fired 2 shots. Both hit. But one was enough to destroy it. The Soviets decided to sit tight and end their turn. The Germans got 1 unit from reserves and sent in the light mortar to start hammering the trenches. They then rolled twice as many orders as they could use at this point. The mortar then moved forward and fired at the infantry in the middle, but it was out of range. The front panzer moved up beside the T-26 and took aim. It spotted it and hit. The shot destroyed the tank before it got to do anything. The sound of an approaching plane could be heard above the din of battle. The second panzer just moved up behind the wrecked Soviet tank, and the turn was over. The Soviet player rolled for air attack, and a plane arrived. It turned out to be an I-153 biplane. He then rolled 7 orders, more than he needed. First, the plane went across the battlefield, opening up at the mortar team with its machine guns. It scored 4 hits, and none were saved. The mortar team was no more. 2 battle counters were drawn, since being attacked by a plane is scary. The AT gun fired twice at the pin 231 and managed to spot it fine. It also scored 2 perfect hits, but the first was more than enough to destroy the car. The infantry just sat tight in their trenches, so the turn was over. The Germans received 2 units from reserves and sent in the senior officer and the platoon command squad. They then rolled 4 orders. The heavy car drove up to the ruined building and disembarked the command squad. The command squad then radioed the mortars, having no problems with the communication. The deviation wasn't too bad, and the shells landed close to the trenches. Both infantry squads were hit by area fire, and one suffered a direct hit. The direct hit caused only 1 hit, but it was saved. The first unit was pummeled by mortar fire, but made their cover safe. The second unit was also pummeled, but they too made their cover safe. The trenchers did their job. The Germans tried to send in their panzers instead to soften the defense. It spotted its target, aimed, and the MG started rattling. 5 hits. Only 1 soldier was struck, and they remained unshaken. The Soviets had 3 orders to work with. The AT gun took aim at the Hanomag and spotted it once. It fired, but the shot went wide. The plane then swooped down towards the building, firing at the command squad within. It scored 3 hits, and the cover stopped one of them. The morale test was made, and the 6 needed to be followed by an experience test, which failed. One of the infantry squads went into ambush, and with that, the turn was over. The only German reinforcements this turn was 2 squads and a truck, but they did get a whopping 9 orders to play with. They started by radioing the mortars, and the communication check was good. The barrage was accurate, with minimal deviation. All the defending units were pummeled by the mortar fire, and force were needed to pin them. The world exploded around the Soviet infantry, but none were affected. The newly arrived truck swung it around and disembarked its cargo. Both the MG squad and the rifle squad opened fire on the plane, hoping to drive it away. The plane didn't like the incoming fire and pulled up to get some distance, but avoided any damage. The half-track moved up, staying out of sight of the bunker, and dropped the senior officer off in the house. A panzer rolled up behind the trenches, firing at the bunker as it went. He scored 3 hits, and one found an opening and injured a crewman. Their morale held. The second panzer swung around the burning wreck and opened fire on the forward aid post. All but one man was wiped out, and he ran off. This cleared the objective, and the Soviets needed to pull 2 counters. An ammo-low counter was pulled and played on the MG team. But they had just enough ammo to get through the battle. The Soviets started their turn with a timed barrage, aiming at the building where the command squad was hiding. The strike was very accurate, and most of the German troops were hit by artillery fire. The command squad took a direct hit, while everyone else within range took pinning hits. The direct hit threatened to take out 3 men. But 2 were saved by cover. They were, however, pinned. The rest were pinned on the 4+, and the vehicles on 2+. Finally, some Soviet reinforcements arrived. And they rolled 3 orders. First, the BA-10 moved up to the hedge and took aim at the rear of the German panzer, but barely missed. Next, a truck drove up and deployed another AT gun. The gun took aim at the 2 panzers, needing force to hit. The shells streaked across the battlefield without finding their targets. The rest of the Germans arrived on the field of battle, and 7 orders were rolled. The first order went to the panzer to answer the new threat. It turned its MGs on the AT gun and managed to spot it. The guns rattled off a hail of bullets, scoring 5 hits. 3 were saved by cover, but only 1 crewman remained. He failed his morale test and decided to get the hell out of there. The other panzer remained stationary and swung its turret around to fire at the BA-10. Rolling 2 spot checks, only 1 succeeded, and a 4 was needed to hit. Next, the mortars were called up to soften out the defenses further. Luckily, the barrage landed away from the Panzer. Both the AT gun and the infantry were struck by direct hits. The mortar scored 3 hits against the AT gun, but the bunker stopped all of them. 4 hits were scored on the infantry, but the 3 up saved from the trenches stopped every single one. A 4 was needed to pin the gun. The barrage had no effect. The infantry squad took cover behind the hedges and took aim at the entrenched infantry across the open field, but they failed to spot them. The Soviets received another 3 reinforcements and 3 orders. More infantry arrived on the field, along with an OT-26 flamethrower tank. First infantry in the trench fired twice at the nearby panzer, hoping to pin it, needing a 6. The BA-10 decided to fire twice back at the stationary panzer, needing 3 to hit. One shot found its target, but glanced off the armor. The crew passed their morale test. With 2 units failing to pin the panzer, the 2nd Infantry Squad made an attempt as well. No luck. 9 orders for the Germans. The panzer looked for a clear shot at the truck and BA-10, needing 3 to spot the truck and 2 to spot the car. The other panzer fired twice at the BA-10. 2 spot checks were rolled, both good. 1 shell flew right past the target, and so did the next. The officer in the house called up mortars again, passing the contest. The deviation was good, centering the barrage on the infantry. The first squad was safe. The other was hit, but saved by the cover. And the AT got unaffected. The infantry behind the hedge fired again, spotting the enemy once, but got no hits. The other rifle squad did the same. Spotted once, got 1 hit, but it was stopped by the trench. The half-track sped up the flank, aiming to get its MG into action. The MG team got into the building and scanned for targets, but found none. The Soviets took the turn and rolled 2 orders. They used those orders to fire at the panzer with their medium mortar. The shot deviated as far as it could while still being able to affect the tank. Having seen the poor performance of the German mortars, the Soviets went through with a shot, hoping to hit the panzer while trusting the trenches to protect his infantry. Unfortunately, both infantry squads were closer. The first squad was pinned, and so was the other. And that was the Soviet turn. The panzer targeted the BA-10 and spotted it once. 1 shot was fired, and it hit. The shell blasted through it, killing the crew. The half-track then kept moving up the flank and went mortar hunting. But it couldn't spot the thing. With the BA-10 out of action, the other panzer remained stationary and turned its attention to the bunker once more. It spotted its target once and opened fire with its MGs. It scored 5 solid hits. One found an opening and left the gun with a single crewman. He failed his morale test and decided to flee. With the defenders pinned, the Germans sent their infantry running across open ground, firing as they went. The first squad hit nothing while advancing. The MG team managed to score a single hit, but it was negated by cover. The third squad couldn't even spot a target. With the AT guns out of action, the truck carrying more troops started driving up the flank. Using the last order, the officer squad in the house aimed for the entrenched infantry, but could not get a clear shot. The Germans rallied all their pinned troops and pulled a battle counter before giving the turn to the Soviets. The rest of the Soviet reinforcements arrived to push back. The Soviet player hoped to roll high for orders, but once more Cthulhu reared his ugly head. With a yell of "Ura Ura!" the infantry surged forwards. The OT-26 finally advanced as well. The infantry in the trench rallied, and that's all the Soviets could do that turn. The Germans, on the other hand, got 6 orders. They started by moving the Panzer up to shoot the OT-26. It spotted its target and needed 5 to hit. The half-track kept moving towards the mortar, but could not get a clear shot. The second Panzer was sent to help against the infantry. They had a clear shot and rolled 6 hits. The cover saved all but 1 man, and they failed their morale. Pinned again. It was time to push the infantry forwards again. The MG team advanced but found no target. The rifle squad did the same. The Soviets had learned to keep their heads down in the trench. And the same went for the last squad. Again, Cthulhu frustrated the Soviets with his presence. The flamethrower tank sped past the Panzer, threatening the infantry. And the infantry in the trench popped their heads out to fire at the approaching enemy. They started with air fire, which had no effect. They then spotted the target for direct fire, needing 3s to hit. Five hits were scored, and 4 men were cut down. The 2 remaining soldiers were pinned down. The Soviets ended their return by rallying again, and now the plane was back in action. With 9 orders, the Germans hoped to make something happen. Again, the half-track tried to take care of the mortar, but for some reason we thought it needed 5 to spot the small target. The Panzer kept up the hunt, keeping its eye on the target. But the shot missed completely. The other Panzer tried to lend its aid to the hunt. They saw the speeding OT, but needed a 6 to hit it. Mortar fire was requested again. The barrage landed behind the trenches, within range of the Panzer. Both infantry squads and the Panzer were hit. A 4 was needed to pin the infantry. And a 6 against the tank. As usual, the German mortars did nothing. In for a penny, in for a pound, the German infantry kept advancing against a now unpinned enemy, hoping to reduce the incoming fire by shooting the defenders. The MG team scored 5 hits, but the trenches kept protecting the Soviets. Seeing the men in danger, the senior officer attempted to rally the rifle squad. A battle counter was pulled and an experience test taken, and failed. More fire was needed against the trenches, so the second MG team was moved forward. They made a long shot and scored a hit. They took down 1 man, but their morale held. The Soviets got their usual number of orders. The infantry opened up against the Germans in the open. Aimed fire at the pin squad, getting 7 hits. With no cover to protect them, they were wiped out. They tried area fire against the MG squad, but had no luck. The OT-26 then raced behind the German lines, spreading fear among their ranks. Eight orders again for the Germans. The OT-26 needed to be taken care of, so the Panzer remained stationary and readied 2 shells. They spotted it once and needed a 5 to hit. The shot shook the crew and they were pinned and needed to take a morale test. They thought it prudent to abandon the vehicle before the fuel tank was ignited. A breakdown counter was pulled and played on the offending Panzer, but it had no effect. Cthulhu might be a Nazi. The half-track switched target to the truck, which is easier to spot. Hitting on 2s, the Germans needed 2 hits to take out the vehicle. The Panzer drove up in front of the trench to keep the Soviets from firing at the infantry, while opening up with its MGs on the other squad. It scored 5 hits, and took out 2 men. The squad failed the morale test and was pinned again. The MG squad moved into cover behind the Panzer and fired at the Pin squad, hoping to dislodge them. They scored 5 hits and killed 1 man. Not only was the morale test passed, but they got beyond the call of duty. The Soviet infantry immediately rallied and fired back. They made their spot checks and sent a hail of bullets towards the Germans. All 6 shots hit, and the MG squad was eliminated. The rifle squad went looking for revenge, but scored only 2 hits. Both stopped by the trench. More mortar fire was needed, but there was trouble with the communication. And the 2nd MG team tried a long shot again to save their friends, but couldn't spot the enemy. The command squad fired at a plane overhead and kept it at a distance, and even scored a direct hit. Again, we looked at the wrong table. The squad shouldn't even have been able to shoot at the plane. The Soviet player tried a new die, and finally got some orders to use. The infantry yelled "Ura Ura" again and rushed into the woods. And the NKVD blocking detachment followed close behind in their cars. Having rallied and taken out the MG squad, the infantry poured fire into the now vulnerable rifle squad. They made 2 spot checks and needed 3s to hit. The first salvo got 3 hits, none were saved, and the squad was pinned. The second salvo got only 2 hits. None were saved, and with only 1 man remaining and pinned, the squad was removed. The infantry, blocked by the Panzer, could see the transport sneaking up on the flank and took aim. They didn't spot it at first, but then they got a clear shot. They needed 4s to hit it. I got 2 hits. 1 fewer than what's needed to destroy it. 9 orders for the Germans again. And again, the blocking Panzer fired at the infantry. It had no trouble spotting them, and all but once would hit them. Five hits were scored, and 3 men were cut down. A morale test was made, and they got another beyond the call of duty. They used a free order to run into the superior cover of the bunker. And the tank now needed 3s to hit. 2 were scored, but were saved by the cover. If they could only remove the last 2 men in that squad, the Germans would seize the last objective. The MG team moved up to the fence and took aim. They found their target and needed 5s to hit. 4 hits. One of the 2 men went down. A failed morale would remove the second one as well. Another 6 for morale. No Beyond the Call of Duty this time though. The command squad in the building added their guns to the mix. The spot checks were made, but 60s were needed to hit. One hit against the bunker wall. The Germans needed a break from the bunker and returned to trying to take out the mortar team. This time the half-track had a clear shot and needed 3 to hit. All hit, but 1 medi save. He failed his morale test, however, and ran away. They needed more infantry support and brought the transport forwards. The last 2 squads jumped out. The rifle squad advanced across the field and fired at the trenches, but had no clear shot. The MG team followed and spotted the enemy. It scored 5 hits, but there wasn't a single casualty. The Germans were running out of units to issue orders to and started hiding their soft targets. The last order went to the Panzer, which moved over to the objective and tried to remove the infantry. Four hits were scored, but the bunkers soaked up every single one. Again, the Soviets got a decent amount of orders. The infantry in the trench felt threatened by the MG team and fired back. They spotted them once and opened fire. The Germans had some cover from defenses, but not enough to save them. The German command decided that too many resources had been spent trying to break the defensive line of the Red Army, and called for a retreat. They would have to wait for the engineers to forge another route forward. One single Soviet soldier had held out, denying the Germans their last objective and victory.